Okay.
Yeah. Hi team, and so today we are going to see the managing containers using Docker. So this is the Docker basic one, and maybe the tomorrow we will see how to deploy the container from Azure Kubernetes service. Okay. So before that, I will ask you, Mebrod and Amos. So did you hear about the term Docker containers before?
No, sir.
Just the name, yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah. So in this one,
That's
right?
about it.
Yeah, yeah, we will see that one. So it's a very easy only. It's not a maybe the tough complex or something, but it will be very interesting also to learn. Maybe year, maybe if you're not get a chance to work on Docker, so mostly you will be working with the VM and the physical server, right, for the deployment everything. But so
Mhm.
this is just like the container, the lightweight deployment model. So it will be very interesting to learn. So yeah, we will see that. Okay. And the agenda, like the first one is like the overview of computing model, like so why the Docker is coming into the picture, and earlier what was the maybe the tool or component we have used. Okay. And then the Docker basics, and so there is a one file here, like maybe you can just assuming it like the configuration file or something. So like this file is to create an image. Okay. And after creating the image only we are going to run the container. Okay. So we will see that one, even if you are not cleared now, maybe we will see that one. And then the multi-stage Docker files. So here also the mostly, right, for example, why we are going from the physical machine or the virtual machine to Docker container is like to better utilizing the hardware resources like memory and CPU. Okay. But here, right, maybe if you are using the multi-stage Docker files, we will be having some advantages. So that one also we will see. Okay. And then in this today's session we will just try to deploy the images from maybe the container registry or some other places to Azure App Services. Okay. So maybe the earlier also you may be you will be understood the Azure App Service. We have deployed some .NET Core web application, right? So at the time we just taken the build and then we have deployed. But in this scenario, instead of the build, right, so we will be creating the image from the maybe the CI pipeline, and after that we will be deploying the particular image to the Azure App Services. So maybe there we are not saying the image or containers, right? So here instead of taking the release build, and here we are creating the image, and then from that image we are deploying it. Okay. But yeah, maybe most of the things maybe you are not hearing, but maybe when we are going to the further slides, right, so you will be understood. Okay. So the first one we will see the overview of computing model. Okay. So this is the computing only means, right, so this is mostly related to the memory and CPU resources. Okay. So for example, if you taken your computer, right, so maybe what are all the major hardware resources, like one thing is like a hard disk, and another one is like the RAM. So maybe that one we will be calling it as memory also, and then the CPU. Okay. So for here, so in the physical machine, right? So for example, you are deploying some one application in one maybe Windows server or Linux server. Okay. So at the time you have deployed maybe the that is something like a very big application. So you have created in monolithic manner, and then it is deployed. Okay. Even inside that application you are having many kind of the sub services, everything. But since you have created in a single project, so everything, so when you are making any changes, even if you are making any class file or any kind of service changes, you have to deploy all the maybe the binary again, and then when it is started to running, right, so it has to load all the binaries and then it has to start. Okay. And maybe here, maybe in the traditionally, right, for example, even so maybe, right, so if you take in some retail website. Okay. So the mostly used service, so for example let's take an Amazon. Okay. So the mostly used service is like you are searching some product, right? Maybe you are doing some filtering, and so that is the mainly used maybe the service from the user's perspective. Okay, so definitely we need to scale the particular one, but in the payment and maybe some other maybe the service, maybe the so we don't have the that much of traffic to the particular service. Okay, so in this scenario, right, so for example we can take an two example. One is like maybe the search API, and another one is like payment API. Okay, so whoever the user searching the product, maybe the same user can do the multiple searches, and finally he will buy the only one product. Okay, but here the traffic, right, the service API will call will have the more traffic. Okay, and then the payment will have the less traffic with compared to the search. Okay, so in this scenario, right, the right approach should be like maybe we need to we need to scale the maybe the search API for the maybe the double times, and maybe the payment API we can just run in the maybe the single instance or something. Okay, so this is the thing, it is not possible in the tradition physical machine or the virtual machine basically. Okay, so if you want to scale, you have to scale the entire application twice or thrice. Okay, so you cannot split into the single service and then you cannot scale it. Okay, but maybe when you are coming into Docker, maybe for all the maybe the payment service you can create as the one service, and then the search API you can create as the one service. Okay, so that you can just scale. Yeah, maybe I need the search API for four instances, and maybe the payment API for only one instance. So you can easily scale the maybe the service based on your traffic, and even you can set up some kind of uh, you can set up some kind of the scaling the rule also, like maybe when the CPU is going above 80 percentage, you can spin up the new container. So maybe if it is if the container the health status is something like the CPU and the RAM usage is something like below 50 percentage, you can reduce the one container from the list. So those kind of option we will be having. Okay, but now, so for example, right, so earlier we are using the uh, single the standalone server. Okay, and after that we moved to the virtual machine, and currently we are in the phase of like Docker. Okay, so I will say so what is the, so why we came from the physical the standalone server to the virtual machine, and then virtual machine to the Docker. Okay, so for example you have the standalone server, so that is having 100 GB of RAM, and then 100 GB of RAM, and the disk quota and all you are having. Okay, so for example you have deployed only one application. Okay, so in this scenario, for example, that total traffic and everything, it's a very small, but for example for the particular application you are just utilizing only like maybe the 10 GB of RAM, and then the disk quota also very less. Okay, but all the remaining memory and CPU and everything, it is wasted, right? Maybe it's not utilized properly. Okay, so for example earlier you deployed the .NET Core 2.1 application. Okay, so you have a requirement that 2.2 application, so there is a one more application 2.2, so that one also you want to deploy. Okay, but you want to make the isolation also, so that there should not be any link to both application. But if you are running the both application, the 2.1 and 2.2 in the same virtual machine, right, it's not like maybe the isolated way, because both are running in the same machine. Okay, so in this scenario what you will do, like whether you will be going to run the 2.2 the version in the same application, sorry, same server, or you are going to purchase a new server. Okay, so in this scenario only it is we are coming into the picture of the virtual machine. Okay, so the virtual machine, what we will do is like, what they will do is like, so we will be having the host machine, so again you can consider like 100 GB of RAM. Okay, and on top of that we will be having the one host OS. Okay, something, so you can assuming it like Windows OS. Okay, and so there is a even after like the Windows 7 and then Windows 10. So even the Microsoft some released some feature for the virtualization. Okay, so for example, you have to virtualize the hardware resources. Okay, so for this reason, the Microsoft released the some feature called the virtualization feature called hypervisor. Okay, so once you have installed the hypervisor on top of the Windows OS, so you can create the multiple virtual machine. So maybe like the VMware and then the VirtualBox. So those and all the virtualization client. Okay, so what they will do is like there will be the host machine, so it will have the 100 GB of RAM, you can just assume, and then on top of that you are having the Windows machine, and after on top of that you are enable the feature of hypervisor, and after that you can create the multiple virtual machine. So for example, right here it is like a guest OS. Okay, so you can create maybe this one is like the first one is like uh, maybe the Windows server. Okay, the second one is like the Linux server. The third one is like Mac, you can say. Okay, so and here, right, maybe you can say like overall 100 GB is there. Okay, maybe the host OS, right, maybe for functioning properly, you can give 2 GB 20, you can allocate 20 GB for the host OS. Okay, and on top of that you are still remaining you have the 80 GB, right, you can equally split up to the other virtual machine, or otherwise you can also split up based on the traffic, maybe based on the complexity or based of the weightage of the maybe application. Okay, so if it is like the maybe the higher traffic it will become, so you can say like yeah, out of 40 GB of memory I will allocate to the 40 GB to this virtual machine, and then 2022 other virtual machine. Okay, so that now you are achieving the isolation and as well as the better utilization. Okay, so this you cannot be done with the physical server, right? So that's why we came to like a virtual machine. Okay, so for example, we have the host machine, and then we have installed some OS, like maybe the Linux also it will support the virtualization, but for an example I will say like Windows. Okay, but on top of that hypervisor we are enabling it for the hardware virtualization, and after that we are creating the multiple virtual machine. Okay, here they are saying example of 3. Okay, and then you can create the maybe the isolated virtual machine, and inside that you can deploy like the first virtual machine you can deploy the ASP.NET Core 2.1 version related application, and then here the second machine you can have the ASP.NET Core 3.1 the runtime application, so that there won't be any link between the two virtual machine. So still the application will be running in the isolated manner, even if both of them in the same host machine, still it will be in the isolated manner only. So that here we are achieving the better hardware resource utilization, and as well as like maybe we are isolating the application, the two applications, so there is no linking or anything, still it will be running like it is running in the different machine only. Okay, so this is why we came from the physical server and then virtual machine. Okay, this is the reason we coming up like that. Okay, so Mebrod and Amos, so you have any query on the virtual machine and from the physical, the standalone server something?
No, sir. I'm good.
Okay, yeah. So the next one, okay. So for example, the next one is like from virtual machine to Docker. So what is the maybe the disadvantage we are trying to accomplish in the Docker? Okay. So for example, maybe here you can say like from the standalone server to by moving to virtual machine, you can save like 50 percentage of maybe hardware utilization, but still you cannot utilize the maybe hardware's 100%. Okay, so for example, right, so here you are having the host OS. Okay, so for example it will take 20 GB. Okay, and each virtual machine, right, it also needs to have the guest OS, like here also you need to have the for example, right, even you also you will be working with the VDI. Okay, so mostly what they will do is like they will be having some VMware, and from that VMware they will just create a one VDA and assign it to you. Okay, but inside the VDA also, right, you need to have the OS, so like Windows or Linux, so then only you can work with that particular machine. Okay, so for example, here, right, so even the out of 100 GB, so here for this host OS we allocated 20 GB, and then here for all the three, right, so we have to allocate at least 10 GB. Okay, which means like again 30 GB just for the operating systems alone. Okay, and after that, based on your application, the library bin or application, so you again you have to allocate the maybe the memory and all, the RAM and all. Okay, but still, right, we are duplicating many guest OS like so for example, here for the operating system itself, like 50 GB we are spending it. Okay, so for to avoid that only, what they have think like, so for example here, right, you will be having the one standalone server, and then you will be having the host OS, and on top of that you will be having the Docker engine or Docker runtime. So for example, the host OS, right, which means like your physical machine. So currently whatever the machine you are connecting, right, so that you can say like host machine. Okay, so what so to add the Docker engine, what you will be doing it like, you are installing the just a Docker application in your machine, like the maybe we can say like Docker engine or Docker runtime, so anything we can say. Okay, and instead of the guest OS and all, so maybe directly after the Docker engine we are deploying our application. That's it. Like so maybe this is the .NET Core 2.1 version application, and this is the 2.2, and maybe this is the like this is something like Linux application. Okay, so this means like for example, we are totally removing the guest OS. Okay, and also, so here, right, so mostly maybe this so still, right, the virtual machine is required for the maybe the developer. Okay, so for example, for the developer, maybe they need they can create the VM, they will be assigning it to you, so that by logging into the VM you will be working with the maybe you will be creating the application. So at this time, right, so you need the guest OS. Okay, so this may be only for the deployment related part. So mostly into the deployment related part. Okay, so for example, so you have the application, so you can directly deploy the 2.2 application, maybe the ASP.NET Core, the 2.2 some web application, you are directly deploying it to it. Okay, so here, right, the bins and libraries means, so whatever the maybe the utility or the maybe the libraries needed only to run the particular the target application, only those libraries only will be there. Okay, so for example, maybe Amos, you can confirm, like you are deploying like ASP.NET Core 4.5 application. So what will be the requirement to run to make your application run? So what are all the infrastructure, maybe the dependencies we need?
So first of all, to start with, we need the .NET framework.
Yeah, correct.
So is it compatible with the application or not?
Yeah, correct.
And then on top of it, all the IAS, if it is a web project. So
Yeah,
those kind of things.
yeah. And additionally, our application binary, so whatever you said, that is correct. So one is like we need the underlying .NET framework, like the 4.5. Maybe if it is the Java, maybe we need the Java runtime environment. Okay, so when you are developing the application itself, right, so we will be choosing the what will be the target environment. Okay, so in .NET we will be specifying like a .NET framework 4.5 or .NET Core 2.1 something. Okay, so in Java we will be saying like the JRE 1.8, JRE 1.11 something. Okay, so for example, let's take an example of the .NET Core 2.1 application. So okay, so because why I'm saying, right, so for example, the .NET framework, it won't have the Docker compatibility, so that is why I'm just taking the .NET Core. Okay, so the .NET Core is the cross platform. It will be running in the both Windows and Linux platform. But the .NET framework, right? So it will be just will be running only on the Windows platform only. It won't be running on Linux or the Docker platform. So you understood, right? So that's why I'm just
Mm.
taking the example of .NET Core application. Okay, so for example, to make the .NET Core application to run, so we need the ASP.NET Core, the 3.1, some framework needs to be there, and on top of that, we need some IaaS server. Okay, like IaaS server need, and after that the binary, maybe our application binary. So after we build our project, right? So we will be having some binary, so that one also needs to be have. Okay, so in this scenario, right? So for example, if you are maybe if you are creating an application, okay, like if you are creating the OS, okay. So for example, if I'm creating the Windows OS, but mostly, right, it will have almost all the maybe the uh, so by default there will be many features it will be coming, right? So for example, the Internet Explorer, or maybe the many utilities, the many functionalities, it will be coming, right, in your Windows operating system. Okay, so for example, let's take an example of the Microsoft Edge browser, or the Internet Explorer, or um, uh, maybe there are many utilities, right? It needs to run the OS. Okay, but those maybe those utilities and all, we don't need to run the .NET maybe the core application. Okay, so maybe in the Docker, what it will do is like, it will just select whatever the utilities needed to just run the .NET core application, so those only will be there. Okay, so maybe additionally, right, for example, the Edge browser, or Internet Explorer, or the Active Directory something, or the user management. So there are many things it will be in the OS, right? The Windows OS. Okay, so all those maybe other external utilities will be ignored. Okay, so the finally, right, the maybe the base image will be very lightweight. So it will just have whatever the application, or whatever the library or the runtime needed to run only the .NET Core 3.1 application. So apart from that, the clock, or the Windows, the clock, or maybe there are many functions, right? The calculator, calendar. So there are many inbuilt in features the Windows OS will have, but those and all, it is not needed to run our .NET Core application. Okay, so those and all, it will be removed. Okay, so that's what I'm making you to understand. But here, the only the .NET maybe the core runtime, it will be there, and on top of that, you will be placing your application. Okay, like after publishing it, right, we will be having some kind of the artifact, right? So that one we will be having it. Okay, so here, and here in the bins and libraries itself, right? So it will have the web server also. Okay, so maybe Amos, you said, right, the IaaS. So the IaaS we will be using when we are deploying from the Windows server. Okay, but here also we need some other web server, but they will be managing it, but it's not a IaaS one. Okay, so there are many the web servers, right? Like, I think here the Kestrel or some kind of web server they are using it, but it's not the IaaS one. So from the Windows we will be using IaaS, but here to host the application they are using the some other web server that is somewhat lightweight. Okay, so from the IaaS, right, you will be having many features, but we are not. So the here in the Docker, it won't be using that, because that's somewhat heavyweight, but here they will be using the very light web server. Okay, so now you understood, right? So for example, we have the physical server, and the host OS. On top of that, I'm installing the Windows 10, you can just say, and I have installed the Docker application, and on top of that, I can host any number of application. Okay, but here they are naming it like a container. Okay, but here they are naming it like virtual machine, but here for each our application instance, right, they are naming it like container. Okay, this is somewhat the very lightweight application. Okay, maybe here you can partition your, maybe you can specify the maybe memory allocation also. Okay, so for example, this application need 1 GB of memory, and this one needs a 512 MB of memory only, it's enough. Maybe here you can say like 2 GB. Okay, so you can run many kind of containers. Okay, so for example, right, if you are having maybe the, so for example, let's take an our development machine. Okay, so mostly, right, you will be having the 16 GB of memory or something. Okay, so in that maximum, what we can create the virtual machine, like we can apart from that host OS something, we can create only one virtual machine. So if you are creating another one more virtual machine, definitely our host machine, everything, it will be slowed down. Okay, but here, right, so if you have the host maybe the 16 GB of memory, so on top of that, if you have installed the Docker environment, we can maybe the deploy mostly, right. So for example, you can so for example, the host OS, right, maybe it will just take 2 to 3 GB. Okay, here we are having remaining 14 GB or 12 GB, you can say. Okay, and then so for each one, right, maybe you can just run in the 400 MB or the maybe the 200 MB also, you can allocate to the container. So that is based on our the traffic and our application need, so that you can deploy more than the 10 containers also, if you have deployed in a very lightweight. Okay, so now you understood, right, my bro and Amos?
So every individual application is called like container, or is it like the collection itself is called containers?
Okay, so for every instance, so for every the application or service, right, it will be called as container. Okay, so for example, right, so this may be applicable for the monolithic application. So inside the VM, you will be deploying some application. So that is the monolithic. Okay, the Docker will be coming only into the picture when you are developing the microservice application. Okay, so for example, even the microservice also, right, you will be creating the many API based application. So one is for the search API, so that is the different one service, and after that the payment service, so this is the different service, and another one is like inventory service, so this is something the different service. So for example, right, so when you are combining maybe the multiple services, you can calling it like maybe the project or application. Okay, but the individual container, like you can say like services. So this is the payment service, this is the search API service, so this is the account service. But when you are maybe when you are integrating all the service, then only you can consider like application. So you got it, right. So for example, right, you have the one big monolithic application. So based on your business object, you are splitting into many services. Okay, and all the
Mhm.
service, right, so for the for each service, right, you will be running in one container. So you understood, right,
Okay.
almost?
So every individual service is a container,
Yeah, correct.
not like a collection of services.
Not like the collection of services. And here, right, so when you're running the maybe the container, you can specify how many instance you need. Okay, so for example, right, in your application, so you have the three services. So one is like search API, payment API, and then maybe the inventory. So there are three services are there. Okay, and for example, the so for the three, you have created a image. Okay, for different image, you have created it. Okay, so when you are running it, so for example, the search API uh, will have the more traffic and more usage, right? So that you can say like, I need a three instance needs to be run, or three containers needs to be run. Okay, but the payment API, it's very lightly used, so that you can say like the replica will be one. So here the replica means how many duplicate instances you are running it. Okay, so that even one container is busy, so it will route the request to the another available container.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is what team. Okay, so the advantages, right? So for example, the portable. Okay, like when you have created the image, you can deploy maybe any environment like dev, QA and production or UAT anywhere. The functionalities will be same. So it will be the behave as like same like in the dev environment, the same behavior only it will be exposed in the production also. So this is somewhat the portable. Okay, so for example, right, if you have deployed in a virtual machine, but anyway there are many chances for like the underlying the framework, and then there will be some minimal mismatch also, it is possible. Okay, so for example, in your the dev machine, right, you will be installing the 3.1 and 3.2 version. Okay, but in the production you will be installing only the 3.1 runtime environment. Okay, so we cannot maintain the consistency at the 100% in the virtual machine level. Okay, but the image, right, in that image you are packaging all the like maybe the base environment and then application library. Okay, so when wherever you are running the particular image, so it will expose the same functionality in all the places. So that is what the portable. Okay, and even you can easily run in the multiple places also, like you just need to pull the image and then you have to just run it. Okay, and then the better hardware utilization. Okay, so for example in the physical machine, right, even the application not having that much of complexity, so we are just wasting 80 GB of memory. So for example the 100 GB of application, if it is lightweight, like we are wasting the 80 GB. Okay, and after that we have introduced the virtual machine, and by that so we are utilized maybe the another the 50 percentage of hardware effectively. Okay, but still we have wasted the many memories because of the guest OS and all. Okay, because we need to duplicate the guest OS, right, then only the virtual machine it will work properly, otherwise the virtual machine won't work. Okay, but to remove it, so again we moved to the Docker. So we have just installed the Docker engine, and on top of that we have straight away we have deployed the application with the lightweight OS. With the lightweight OS means like we are just ignoring all the maybe the Windows Explorer or the calendar, and there are many functionalities, it will by default it will come from the Windows OS, right? So all those things will be ignored, only the whatever the target environment needed to run the particular application, so that only will be there in the particular bins and libraries, and directly we are adding the application and something also. Okay, so that the containers it will be very very lightweight, so that we can easily deploy and boot the application very faster. Okay, so for example the binaries the something, right, the application it will be just having the many the lightweight, so that we can easily spin up the containers for the deployment. But for example if you want to create a one virtual machine something, right, it will take a lot of time. So for example you have to download the maybe the Windows maybe image, and after that you have to configure the virtual machine first, and inside that you have to log into that system, and then you need to install the corresponding the target framework. So it will be just it will take so much of time, right? But here we just need the Docker image. By just running the Docker run, we can deploy the application. That's it. Okay, so this is the another advantage, like we can deploy and boot the application faster. So team, you are good with this slide, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, Amos. Okay. So the next one is like the Docker basic. Okay. So for example, currently, right, you can just assume like we have installed the Docker runtime. Maybe you can so Mebrad, Amos, so you both are working the Windows OS only, right?
Yeah, I am on the Windows.
Okay. So which version you are using, like Windows 10 or 7?
So on my laptop, I have the 10, but on the server, that's where like we are developing, right? Like as a
Okay.
virtual machine we have. So that is
Okay.
like the Windows 2016, I think.
Okay. Okay. So that is the server maybe. So Windows to
Yeah.
okay. So maybe in your local environment, right? So that is the Windows 10 Pro or Home Edition. I think
Pro.
Oh, Pro. Okay, so then it will
Yeah.
support the Docker installation. So you can just go through some. I think there are many articles are there. Okay, maybe the one requirement is like we need to enable uh, the virtualization. Okay, so for example, so here right the task manager. So I'm going to performance and going to memory. Uh, Okay, I think we don't need the hardware virtualization. So I think the virtualization may be needed only for the virtual machine. Okay. Yeah, I think here the virtualization is enabled. Okay. So the only one requirement is like the virtualization needs to be enabled. So okay, so there is something like the Docker for desktop. Docker for Windows desktop something. So you can just going through some URL, so you will be able to configure it. Okay, and maybe for example if you want to build or running any kind of command, so it will be easy, you can running it from your local itself. Okay, but initially for the installation may be the big thing, but once you have configured right, the next time onwards it will be very easy. Okay, so for example you want to enable the virtualization, maybe that sometimes it will ask. Okay, so you can just try to install Docker in your machine, and then if you have any difficulties you can let me know, I will guide you.
Okay, maybe I will try it on my personal laptop
Yeah,
rather than the office laptop.
yeah, correct.
Okay.
So okay, so for example, right? So this is the Docker basics one. Okay. For example, I have configured the Docker machine. So Docker I have installed in my machine, so that the Docker runtime I'm having. Okay, so that I can run the following commands like the Docker build, pull, push, run. So even there are many other commands also there, but just for an example, I'm just keeping. So these are all the four basic commands. Okay, so the first one is like the build command. So the build command, what it will do is like it will create the image. Okay, so for example, the creating the image means like so for example, you are creating a one. Maybe the API project. Okay, so for example, the for that project you need to create a one image. So you have to create an image for the particular API, for the particular API project. Okay, so what the solution the API project it will have is like one Docker file it will have. Okay, so the inside the Docker file you will be having all the commands to create an image. Okay, so for example, if it is the .NET Core application, right? So the first requirement is like it has to get the some base image. So the base image will have the maybe the all the libraries and binaries needed to run the .NET Core application. Okay, and after that it will just have the series of commands. Okay, maybe the next slides, right? We will see the Docker file. What is the Docker file and all? Okay, but for now you can just try to understand like, so whenever you are running the Docker build command, so it will just look the current working directory if there is any Docker file is present or not. Okay, if the Docker file is present, whatever the commands we have added that, so it will just run all the sequence of commands, and then finally it will create an image also. Okay, so that and after that, right? So once you have run the Docker build command, so it will look out the Docker file in the working directory, and then based on the definition we have specified, it will create an image. Okay, so after that you can just run the Docker image command, so that the newly created image will be there. Okay, the Docker image ls, that command will list out the what are all the available images in your system. Okay, so the next one is like maybe the, so now you have built the new image. Okay, and after that you have to push it to some centralized repository. Okay, like the Docker hub or the ACR. So those are all the container registries. Okay, so those are all the container registries. You will be just creating some account, and after that you have to log into the particular account, so that when you are just running the Docker push and then the image name, right, you will be able to run the images from your local machine to the centralized repository. So from that repository, anyone in your organization, they can clone, they can pull the images. Okay, so for example, if it is the public repository, anyone in the internet, they can push it, sorry, pull it. And if it is within your organization, so only within your, across your organization only, they can pull the images. Okay, so this is for creating an image, and this is to the pushing is for pushing an image to the repository. And after that, if you want to pull the existing image, you can run the docker pull command. Okay, so and this is for creating an image, pushing an image to repository, and pulling an image from the repository. And the next one is like currently you have the image in your in your host machine. Okay, you can just say like docker run and then image. Okay, the image name. Okay, so what it will do is like it will just create an container now. Okay, whatever the image we have created, right, the image will have all the maybe the base image and then your application. And when you are running the docker run, so at the time only your application will starts to run. Okay, the image is like maybe the artifact, you can assume. Okay, the image is like artifact. Maybe when you are running the image, after that only it will create a container, so then only your application endpoint will be exposed and all. Okay, so now you understood all the basic commands, right, Amos and Membrod?
So the Docker we are like installing on the operating system, and then we will be having the microservice, for example, right? So from the microservice, then that's what is going to get like build,
Yeah, correct.
and that build is going to create an image with that microservice.
Yeah, so for that microservice, it will create an image. Yeah, correct.
And then that image we are pushing it to a repository, say like Docker Hub or ACR.
Yeah, correct.
And using that repository, what are we going to do? Like, how is it like connected with Azure?
Yeah. Yeah. So and so currently, yeah, you can just yeah, I will say that one. So currently we are pushing it to a repository, the centralized repository. And so for example, right, someone maybe in your team, they have pushed their maybe the image, so you want to test it from your local. So at the time you will be using the pull command to get the particular image, and after that you will just run docker run command. And so it will start the application. So you are clear with this one, Amos? So maybe I will say the next one, so whatever you
So
ask.
that's what that run, that part only I'm missing.
Okay.
So if I'm taking a repository, right? Like if
Yeah.
I'm using pull command, so I'm going to get an image,
Yeah.
and then that image, when I'm doing a Docker run,
Yeah.
so how is it going to get like implemented? So
Okay.
where is it getting implemented?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
asking.
sure, Amos. Okay. So for example, right, so the when you are running the docker run command, it will just start the application in your local environment, in your host machine. Okay, but our so maybe in the Azure, right, where it is connected with Azure. Okay, so for example, these are all the container registries like Docker Hub and ACR. So you are just pushing, you are just using those as the repository, image repository. Okay, so and maybe how it is connected with maybe Azure or something. Okay, so these are all the services to run the containers in the Azure. Okay, like Azure Web App, container instances, Azure Kubernetes services, and Azure Service Fabric. Okay, so what it will do is like it will, they will be having the container environment. Okay, so when you are creating the service, right, so you will be having the Docker runtime environment, and there all the Docker containers will be running it. So you got it, right? So for example, so earlier we deployed Azure Web App, right? So we have just created the service, and after that we deployed the application, so it is started to running it. Okay, the similar like you will be just deploying an image to any one of the following services, and after that you will be your application will be started. So these are all maybe the Kubernetes, the container instances, everything, right? This is the orchestration tool. Okay, so for example, the so maybe I'm just for an example, I'm saying like we can run the container using the docker run command. Okay, so for example, right, so you will be so when it comes to the microservice world, you will be having the hundred or thousands of microservices. Okay, so for every time, by just running the docker run command, we cannot manage the uh, platform, the application. Okay, so that is why the orchestration, the tool is coming into the picture. You will be just specifying the what are all the images I need to execute it, and how many instances, and what are all the scaling rules, everything you will be specifying in the manifest.yaml file or something. Okay, and so when you are providing the particular YAML file to the Azure Kubernetes service, it will always make sure that it will pull the image from the repository, so image repository, and it will start deploying it. Okay, and if due to any reason, if any one of the image, the container is crashing or something, it will delete the particular container, and then it will again take the container registry from the container from the, sorry, image from the registry, and then it will deploying into the their platform. Okay, so maybe how here it is connected, like so for example, that this is the docker run command, so this is just for our uh, maybe understanding how we can run the, maybe the image in our local environment. Okay, the container in the local environment. But when it comes to the real, the production based application, so you need to handle the hundreds of microservices. We cannot deploy just by running the docker run command. Okay, so in those scenario, what we will be doing it, like we will be having some YAML file, and in this YAML file I will be just specifying, so this is the image, and this is the path where it is located in the repository, and these many instances it needs to execute it. Okay, so for all the hundreds microservices, I will be creating in the YAML file, and finally I will be providing it to the Azure Kubernetes the service. Okay, because it will just expect the YAML file as the input. Okay, and finally, right, it will be deploy the it will, the Azure Kubernetes itself, it will pull the image from the repository, and then it will be deployed into their platform by just reading the YAML file. It will fetch the image, and then it will deploy to the Kubernetes the cluster platform. Okay, so you got it right, Amos?
Yeah. Do we have a demo for this one?
Yeah. So the next one, right? So the next session, so we will see the Kubernetes service. So in that one, right, we will be seeing how to deploy the web app from the, so yeah, how to deploy the image to the web app, the Azure web
Okay.
app. So from the next session, we will be deeply, we will be seeing the Azure Kubernetes service alone. Okay, so this is where the production related capabilities it will be coming into the picture. But the docker run, so just to run in our local machine, because right, so when we are having the multiple services, we cannot just deploy by just running the docker run command. Okay, so this is but anyway, right, the docker run command is common. Okay, the Kubernetes also, in the behind the scene, it will run the docker run command only. Okay, but but we won't run it, because we will be just specifying the YAML file. But in behind the scene, it will read the YAML file and fetch the image, and finally it will run the docker run, so that those and all automatically. Okay, so that is what Amos. Okay, so team, you are clear with this one, right? The basic, like the basic commands, and these are all the docker, the container registries. The here also as like another repository, like here also having like public repository, private repository. So the public means anyone can access it, so the Docker hub you can say. Even the Docker hub also, they are providing the private registry also. And so from that Azure, right, so this is the Azure container registry. Okay, so from that Azure there are many services, right? So this is the one of the service to store our images. Okay, so maybe in your production use case, right, maybe that is based on your application or organization. So maybe they may be using any one of those, like Docker hub or ACR, or otherwise, right, they also will have the one server for they also will have the registry, everything by their own data center itself. Maybe they may be using their own registry also. like so the JFrog, and then another the Nexus and all, right? So those also the artifact repository, it will support the it will support to manage the images also. Okay, so they can be install the JFrog in their on premise, so that they can use the those image repository also. But maybe I'm just saying like the two, the Docker Hub and ACR, maybe other repository also possible. Okay, and then so this is for hosting the image, and these are all the services in Azure to run the containers like Azure Web App, Azure Container Instances, and Azure Kubernetes Service, Azure Service Fabric. So, and out of the four, right, the only the popular one is like Azure Kubernetes Service. Okay, so for example, there are many orchestration tool like the Docker Compose, Docker Swarm, and the Service Mesh. So there are many things, but all with compared to all the maybe the finally currently the winner is like Azure Kubernetes Service, the Kubernetes, right? So this is the open source tool, so initially developed by the Google. So the Google is developed the Kubernetes, the tool for their own purpose, and after that they make it as open source tool, and then they have given to the wider community, and from there the all the open source contributors, they are contributing it. So currently it is having all the capability like self healing, auto deployment. So it is having much futures like by the Kubernetes you can easily manage the maybe the microservices easily with compared to any other orchestration tool like the web app or container instances or service fabric. So out of three, the Azure Kubernetes is the very easy to manage. Even the YAML file or something, it is something initially hard to understand, but it is having all the self healing. So which means like if there is any container is not performing well, the Kubernetes itself, it will stop the container, and instead of the particular container it will create the new container. Okay, and one more thing is like for example you have the search API, and you have the four containers already running for it. Okay, so when the multiple requests are coming to the Kubernetes, right, it will just route to the available containers, so it won't be always route the request to the maybe the maximum traffic the containers. Okay, so it will find the what is the available container, or it is having the very less traffic, so it will just assign to the particular container, and then it will get the response as soon as it can. Okay, so similar like it will have the many features, so that is why everyone preferring the Kubernetes. Okay, the Kubernetes, the open source tool, and the Azure is providing so those Kubernetes managed by the Azure, and so they are just providing it as the platform as a service, so that we don't need to do any kind of setup for the Kubernetes. We just need to create the Kubernetes cluster, and how many the system or the hardware configuration need, and behind the scene the Microsoft will manage all the installation configuration part. So we just need to deploy our application or the image something, we just need to provide the images, and then the manifest.yaml file. So the rest of the things the Kubernetes it will take care. Okay.
In a simple terminology, Selvan, like
Yeah.
if I am a developer, right? Like I am building a microservice,
Yeah.
and I'll be testing the microservice using the Visual Studio itself, like
Okay.
unit testing.
Yeah.
And then when I'm done with that project and I wanted to deploy into the Azure, right?
Yeah.
So I will be giving the bin file to the DevOps engineer, or how is this whole thing? So do I need to, as a developer, right? So
Yeah.
do I need to build using the Docker, and then do I build and then push it into the repository, or is it all like once I give the bin file or whatever the microservice that the build files, right? Like other than the exe dll or whatever the additional supporting files, whatever I need to give it to them. If I give it to them, are they going to build using the Kubernetes, or are they expecting the image itself?
Okay, so I'm also this one, right? So for example, the DevOps and the DevOps culture, right? Maybe the CI/CD.
Mhm,
Okay, so the
mhm.
developer life cycle, it will be end when they are pushing the code to the main repository, the Git repository, master branch. Okay, so after
Okay.
that, all the maybe the creating the build or the image, so everything it will be automated in the CI pipeline, the CI/CD pipeline. Okay, so for example,
Mhm.
you are maybe if you are a developer, your role will be like you are just reading the you will be just reading the your user story, and then you are completing it, and then you will be pushing it to the repository. Okay, and after that automatically the build will be started, and then it will create an image, and it will be deployed into the dev and SAT environment and all. And maybe if it is not automatic deployment is configured, maybe someone from the ops team or you may be going to the particular portal, and then you will be just manually triggering the application deployment. Okay, but in the DevOps and then the microservice, you won't be providing any kind of the bin folder or any kind of image by just running in your local machine. Okay, but everything it will be happening in the Azure DevOps or any other CI tools only.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are the like the finished code? I'm going to push it to the master, and then what is defined on the CI/CD pipeline. So that's what it is going to do
Yeah.
with all the
Yeah, it will
build,
automatically,
getting the
yeah,
image.
yeah, it will automatically take, and it will take a build. So for example, in the microservice application I'm saying, okay, so for example, you have just committed some code to your repository. Okay, so from that so from the developer, right, you have just updated your latest code. Okay, and the next, the CI pipeline, what it will do, like it will check out your code and then compile, and then finally it will take an image. Okay, it will build an image, because in your source code, right, you will be having the Docker file also by default. Okay, so based on the Docker file you specified in your your project file, so it will be create a image. Okay, and then it will be pushing the repository to it will push an image to like Docker Hub or ACR. Okay, and then finally maybe, right, so maybe the next is the CD stage. Maybe someone they can just the CD pipeline also it will be configured. Maybe they may be configured to run in any one of the web app or Kubernetes or Azure container instance if they are choosing the Azure platform. Okay, and then they can just run the dev deployment, so that all the maybe the only the affected services will be deployed in the dev environment. Okay, and if you want to stage the same release to the QA, you can just click on the release, and then you can be move it to the QA environment. Okay,
Okay.
yeah, maybe in the traditionally, right, so we have, for example, we will be running the build in our local machine, and then we will be copying the bin or object folder, whatever the files inside that. So those things only we will be maybe we will be providing it to the ops team. But here, right, everything the ops team we are not, so here there is no concept for the ops and all, right, so that everything the CI/CD pipeline it will take care of all of the things. But the initial
Okay.
work the
So.
DevOps team member will do, like the CI/CD pipeline, right? Like where it needs to
Mhm.
maybe the deploy and then push an image. So that is the one-time setup. So that one will be done by the DevOps member.
Okay. So once after I push the code to the master branch, right? Like, so I remove my developer hat, and then now I am going to do like a CI/CD or the DevOps engineer. So what kind of technology thing I need to be knowing it?
Okay.
Only just a YAML.
Yeah. Yeah, so for example, you are saying like after maybe pushing the code, maybe
Mm.
to run the build and deployment, you are saying, or you want to be a
Mhm.
DevOps member, and what are all the technologies you want to? So how you
Yeah,
are
as
asking?
a DevOps
Okay,
engineer, right?
yeah,
Like, how do I, you for setting up the CI/CD pipeline, everything.
yeah,
So what are all the technologies do I need to know?
yeah, yeah. Okay, Amos. Okay. So for example, right? For example, you are you are going to create an CI/CD for the .NET Core application. Okay, so for example, maybe you need to know the .NET, maybe the API application. So then only you can know like how the what is the compile and what is the build and publish command. So those kind of overall idea you will have. So that you need to have some basic idea about the .NET. Okay, so since you are going to deploy the create a CI/CD for the .NET based application. Okay, and then the next one is like Git, the source control management. Okay, like maybe the checkout, Git checkout, maybe if there is any conflict you have to resolve it. So that you need to know the Git, maybe in the intermediate level you need to know the Git you need. Okay, and
So
after,
that will be the developer job, right? Like till they move into the master and then get everything set.
yeah. So for example, right, the source code control is the Git is right. So that is the source code management, source control management tool. Okay, but you will
Yeah.
the developer also they will be pushing it, but the creating the repositories and all the developer won't be creating it, right? The DevOps member only will create it. But anyway, right? So in the CI/CD pipeline, he need to integrate the checkout command and then the creating the tag. So even he also needs to know, right? So for example, the
Mhm.
Git is not only for the developer. So maybe you also one of the role, even in the Git, right? So there will be many roles. Okay, the developer role, admin role, and reviewer role. Okay, so the developer role means like for example you will be having the right access so that the developer can push the code to the repository. Okay, so admin means like managing the repository, like if you want to create the repository, delete the repository, or configuring the branch policies, the pull request flow. So everything like the admin only he will do. So in this place, mostly the DevOps member will do. Okay. So he also,
Mhm.
right? So better knowledge than developer, the DevOps member needs to have it. So then only if there is any the developer is stuck, so that they can guide. And if there is any code conflict, maybe if there is any kind of code conflict, something, maybe they can come and resolve the code conflicts and all. Okay, but anyway, right, so without knowing the Git, he cannot maybe do the checkout and maybe the connection and all, right, authenticating the Git before checking out. So everything the DevOps member also needs to know, like many tools like DevOps member needs to know. Okay, so for example,
Mhm.
right, I said the .NET basics and then Git intermediate, and then from the Azure DevOps only you are going to create the CI/CD pipeline, so that Azure DevOps you need. Okay, and then maybe if you want to create the pipeline as code approach, so that you need to know some basics about the YAML one. Okay, and then you for all the build everything, right, it will be running in the Linux agent. Okay, so that you need to know the Linux environment, like the basic commands, like the Linux you need to know. Okay, and after that maybe and after that yeah, you want to push it to the repository, right, image repository. If you know, if you want to push it to the image repository, so maybe you need to know like ACR or image hub. Okay, if it is something other than that, like the Nexus or JFrog image repository you want to work with, so that you need to work with some other the tool also. Okay, and then for example when it comes to the deployment, like the Kubernetes, so for example you are deploying with the Kubernetes platform. Okay, so that you need to know the knowledge about the Docker, Kubernetes, so those things. Okay, so the skills and technologies, right, so it will be differ based on the technology you are working on and what are the platform you are targeting to deploying. Okay, but anyway, Amos, so this is something like for example if you know the one target platform, right, maybe if you know IAS server, you know like how it is working. Okay, but the same thing only the Docker, maybe the Kubernetes also they will try to do the same thing, but the UI or something it will be differ, maybe the syntaxes or the keywords. So those things you need to understand it. Okay,
Okay,
but
I'm
the
more trying to understand like what we did before deployment, right? Like on the previous deployment directly, we were running the pipeline and then we got the app service deployed.
yeah.
So in this case, like now we are talking as a different deployment model,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So here, right? So you will be just providing the YAML file. Okay. So, but other than that, right? So even so you just need to have an understanding like to deploy in the Docker environment, right? So there is a only one possibility is the Docker run command. Okay, so whether it is you are going to run or the Kubernetes going to run, so that is the different the way of deploying. Okay, so for example, the 1,000 time we cannot run the Docker run command, right? So just that is why we are just providing the role to Azure Kubernetes, so it will deploy it. So for example, the I will just providing an YAML file, and after that the Kubernetes, it is having the ability to read the YAML file, and then it will deploy whatever the defining there, right? Maybe the expectation. Okay, so it will always maintain the those expectation, my search API application, it always needs to have the 4 instances. For each instances it should have the 1 GB of memory quota assigned, so those things.
Okay.
Okay, but anyway, Amos, so for example, right, only the when you know the concepts, so that time it will be very big things with compared to the maybe the IaaS deployment. Okay, but when you see the real time action, right, it will be just simpler than the IaaS deployment. In the IaaS, right, you will be manually copying the binary everything, and then you will be pushing it to your machine, right? But here, right, we will be just providing the manifest the YAML file, and then when you're just running the kubectl apply command, it will automatically deploy the whatever you are specifying in the YAML file. So this will be more simpler than the IaaS deployment, but you initially you need to understand the concepts. Okay, but we cannot straight away go to the Kubernetes also. Okay, but the basic thing is like you need to know the Docker. Okay, and once you know the Docker, the other things you can easily understanding it. Okay.
So more like YAML, multiple different ways, like how it is getting deployed. That's what we need to more understand, right?
Yeah. So for example, right?
So
So
it's kind
why
of
they?
like a pipeline.
Yeah. So for example, why they are adding the YAML code here? So the YAML file. So this will be easy to understand the human and as well as the machine. Also, they can the serialize it, right? So for example, it can deserialize the YAML, and then they can maybe they can bring into some kind of the C# object or something, right? So that they can easily deserialized by the system. Okay, so that is why they are going with the YAML. And also, right, so for example, you just want to know how many instances running in the A service. Okay, so you can just go and see the YAML file. You can understand that, yeah, these many services it is running in the Kubernetes platform. Otherwise, right, you cannot go, maybe otherwise, right, we have to go to Kubernetes cluster, and then we need to run the kubectl command to get the how many containers it is running for the particular application. Okay, but everything it's the, so for example, right, in the infrastructure as code also, so why we are doing making it to the code, so that it is easy to maintain it. Okay, so for example, the same the so for example, right, you are having the hundred thousands of microservices, you have deployed the one YAML file. Okay, the same YAML file you can take that one, and then you can immediately you can spin up the another Kubernetes cluster also. Okay, those and all the benefit is it is having, that is why we are using the YAML file. So otherwise, right, if you want to create a, maybe they are saying the similar like the production environment, you need to create the another environment. Okay, so instead of YAML file, if you are not having the YAML file, what you will do? You manually you need to run the again all the Docker run commands, right? Again, so there is some possibility that the human can miss some kind of containers, so that we cannot always assure that the 100% it is same the production and the new production environment. Okay, but instead of that, if you can take the manifest.yaml file whatever you have deployed to the production environment, you can take the same thing, you can just run the same YAML file for the deployment. Okay, so it will make sure that the same identical what it is there in the production, it will be same there will be in the new production environment also. So within maybe the 5 minutes you can spin up the new production environment.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Amos. Yeah. So sorry, my brother. So you raised the hand. I think just I have unmute you. So is there any queries you have, my brother? Hello. Okay, I think she's not there. Okay, team. Yeah. So maybe we will go to the next one. Uh, so the next one is like the Docker file. Okay. So for example, Amos, I have said, right? So for example, the Docker file will be added in your source code repository. Okay. So for example, you are having the .NET application in the root directory or some other directory, you will be keeping the Docker file, like how it needs to be created. Okay, how the image needs to be created. Okay, so for example, right, in your Visual Studio Solution Explorer, right? So under the solution, you will be having the many projects, and each project it needs to have the Docker file if they are containerizing the application. If they are not using the containers or the for the deployment, they don't need it. Okay, if they are deploying in any one of the containerization environment, at the time they need to have the Docker file. Okay, the Docker file, it will have all the it will have all the commands to create the particular image. Okay, so for example, we already said, right? So what are all the things we need in the image? Okay, so for example, we need the underlying the libraries and bins needed to run the particular API project, and after that our API application, the API binary, it needs to have. Okay, so those things only we are going to specify in the Docker file. Okay, so for example, right, this is something like the basic the Docker file. So this is the from Ubuntu. So this is the base image. Okay, the Ubuntu means it will have the lighter the Ubuntu version, so that it will just have the Ubuntu base the version only. Okay, and on top of it, right, so we will be creating like the app setup some folder, and then there we are just executing it. So like some kind of comments we are executing it, and then the cmd file. Okay, the from means like the base image, like what is the base image we are going to use it. Okay, so for example, right, in the .NET Core application, here you will be specifying like ASP.NET the 3.1 SDK. Okay, so maybe that may be the base image for you for our .NET application. If it is the Java application, the base image would be like the JRE 1.8 something. Okay, the label means like this is the optional one, so who is maintaining the particular image. Okay, the add command is for the creating a one working directory inside the container. Okay, like so inside the Ubuntu image, like this is the light version of the virtual machine, something we can say, right? So inside the container something, it will have the app setup folder. Okay, and after that run command. Okay, the run command is like when you are building the image, right, at the time it will run the particular command. Okay, when you are running the docker build command, right, at the time the particular docker run command will be executed. Okay, the cmd command is for example, when you are running the command, right, the docker run. Okay, to create the container, so at the time it will run the particular command, like the echo hello world from within the container. Okay, the run command will be executed when you are running the docker build command to create while creating an image. But the cmd command, right, it will be executed when you are creating a container, like when you are running the docker run, right, at the time only it will run the cmd command. Okay, so otherwise, right, sometimes they will be using the entry point also. So mostly, right, so for example, when you are running the particular container, so you need to provide the startup command, right? So when you are deploying means, right, you will be copying the application binaries, everything, and after that you will be running some kind of command, right, to just starting your application. Okay, so those commands you will be specifying in the cmd block. Okay, otherwise you can use the entry point also. So that is the starting command, like maybe if it is the .NET application, we will be providing like .NET and then the web application DLL, so that it will be started it. So you got it right, Amos, like from run cmd command.
Mm, yeah,
Okay, this is the base
very
image.
nice.
This is just to create the working directory inside an image, and the run means during the building stage it will run. Okay, during the building image, right, the docker build command, at the time the run command it will run. The cmd means when your application needs to started, right, so which means like creating a container. Okay, At the time CMD, whatever you are specified in the CMD block, it will be executed. So this may be the starting point for your application. Okay. So the next one is like the Docker file overview. Sorry, multi-stage Docker file. Okay. So earlier we have seen some basic file, right? So this one is like the multi-stage Docker file. Okay. So the multi-stage means like, for example, right, you will be having the multi from statement. The from means like the multiple stages. So this is for the this image, right? The ASP.NET Core 3.1. Okay. So this is the base image. Okay. And then this is the build image SDK 3.1. Okay. And then here they are using the from build as publish. Okay. So the same image they are using it for publishing, and the base as final. Okay. So for example, here you want to understand like, if you are having the multiple from image, right? So this is the multi-stage image. Okay. So for earlier example, right, we just had a only one. So in this example, right, we just had a only one from class, sorry, from keyword, so that it is just having the only one base image. Okay. But here, right, so here we are having the many base image. Okay. So for example, why we are using the multi-stage. Okay. So for example, to remove the unwanted the temporary files or intermediate files, right, to avoid those things we are using the from the multiple stages. Okay. So for example, Amos, so you can say, so for example, right, the ASP.NET Core 3.1, which will just have the runtime environment only. Okay. It won't have the SDK or the those capabilities. Okay. The SDK will have the all the build or the publish, all the development kits will be there in the SDK image only. Okay. The ASP.NET Core means like it will just have the runtime environment just to host the application. Okay, you got it, right? You have the understanding, right? So what is the runtime environment and what is the SDK? The SDK will have all the the development related the tools also will be there, but the ASP.NET Core only it will have the runtime capabilities. Okay, so for example, the SDK will have about maybe the 400 MB in size. Okay, but the runtime it will just have the 100 MB in size, because it is just having the runtime capabilities, but here it will have the runtime plus development capabilities also it will have. So almost you got it, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Runtime and development SDK. Okay. So for example, so here, right, I said like when you are specifying the run command, so during the build stage, right, so when you are running the run Docker build, so at the time all the run command will be executed. Okay. So for example, right, so here what they will be doing it like the slash app command. Okay. The slash app, they're just creating the working directory, so inside the particular base image, and after that they are exposing the two ports like 80 and 443. So you know that the HTTP will be listening on the 80 port and HTTPS will be listening on 443. Okay, so you can change your own port also, but maybe as a standard, the 80 for HTTP and 443 for HTTPS. Okay, so this is the base, one of the base image. Okay, and another one is like the Docker build. Okay, so in this stage only we are going to build it. Okay, so for example, right, in your Visual Studio you are just running the build command, so that it will be just running the build output, right? But the similar case, inside your Docker image file also you can provide the command. Okay, so here you are saying like the base image we have to take SDK 3.1, and I'm going to create a source directory as I'm going to create one more new directory like slash source, and inside that I'm just copying the CS project. Okay, so in this example, right, they are saying like web application 1.cs project. Okay, but you can maybe modify as per your uh, project file. Okay, and then they are just running the .NET restore. So you know that the .NET restore, it will restore all the dependencies. Okay, so in this case, right, it will just so inside your CS project file you will be keeping all your project dependencies like the maybe the SQL maybe dependencies, or uh, maybe the SQL library dependencies, or any HTTP library. So there are many libraries, right? Whatever you are specified in the CS project, it will restore it. Okay. So now it will keeping in your some kind of folder, it will keep. Okay. And then the next is the copy folder. So the copy, what it will do is like from your Visual Studio, right? So you will be having all your class files. Okay. And then the dot means like inside your container you are having the source folder, right? So here in your machine, so whatever the files in your machine, right, it will be moved to the particular folder, to the your newly created the source folder. Okay. So currently, right, so you are having all the all the solution files or the project file, all the classes, everything you are having it. And apart from that, the restore also you have done it. Okay. So now you can run the .NET build command. Okay. So that you are just running the .NET build command, and then here you are specifying like this is the release build, and then the output will be moved to the /app/build build folder. So inside that build folder you will be having the build output. Okay. So you got it right, Amos, like what they are doing in that particular block.
Mm. Yeah.
Okay. And after that,
Maybe when we run this one, then physically, as we see like where the files are getting generated, then
yeah, but
maybe
even
it'll reflect more clear.
even in your when we are seeing in the manually also, you cannot maybe see everything. So in the back, so these all the things, it will be happening in the back end only. Okay. But you can just run the docker build command, and it will do all of the things. So but you cannot see anything in the behind the scene. So it will download the images, and then it will copy the CS project file, and then it will run the .NET restore command, but you cannot see all those things. So it will be running in the backend. So you are just specifying the commands only here. Okay. But so you can just to try to understand, but maybe we can just run the in the action also, so you will understand. But those things and all, right, so you cannot understand just by seeing in the practical. Okay. So these are all the key these are all the keywords we just needs to know. Okay. So for example, you have created the build output in this folder. Okay. And then here one more the stage you are creating, it is called publish. So in this scenario also you will be using the same build. So whatever the build stage you have specified the same thing, and then it will be publishing the, so in this stage, right, it will publish the release output to the publish folder. Okay. So this is what it will do. Okay. And then finally the base, so it will take the base image like the 3.1. so this one is the final stage. So inside the slash app, right, maybe it will create the new app folder, and it will copy whatever it is there in the publish folder. It will be keeping into the app/publish. Okay. So now you will be just having the publish, whatever having in your publish folder, it will be moved to the this publish this app folder. Okay. So in between, right, you are having the restoring the dependencies, and then the building the temporary the build files, everything will be ignored. So in your final stage, what it will do is like the base image means like ASP.core 3.1 runtime environment. And after that, uh, so whatever it is from the publish folder, so here we have published the binary, right? So it will just copy into the app into the final the image. So inside that slash app, right, so inside that it will copy all the files. Okay. And then finally the entry point we are providing like the .NET web application 1.dll. so this will be entry point when you are running the particular command. Okay.
Hmm.
So Amos, you got it right. So for example,
Yeah.
yeah. So and this will be just the starting command. You are just specifying in the image. So this will be executed when you are running the Docker run command. So it will just execute the .NET command so that your application will be started. Okay. So this is what the team like the Docker file. Okay. Maybe for example, okay, now the time is 8:54. Okay. So okay, so maybe can we start? Hello.
So, Selvan, so does we consider this Docker instead of like VM or OS, or it's just a tool like
Yeah.
control source control
Yeah, so
for
this is
CI/CD.
yeah, so this is the containerization environment tool, Mebrat. Okay, so for example, to run your application in the containers, right? So you need to go with any kind of containerization based tool. Okay, the popular one is the Docker, and another one is the Rocket also, and some other tools also there. Okay, even I am also not aware, but the popular containerization tool is the Docker. Okay, once you have installed the
But
Docker.
from the functionality, I mean, it seems like it's kind of a gig because it's like you pulling and
Okay.
pushing to a
Yeah.
repository any
Yeah.
image, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
same thing with Git also. Yeah,
Yeah.
you
So
push
the
your code to repositories or pull your
yeah.
code from
Yeah.
repository to
Yeah.
local. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. Correct.
So what is
Yeah.
exactly the difference?
Yeah, yeah, correct, Member. Okay, so the Git is for the source control management tool. So there you will be just running the Git pull, Git push to just to update your repositories. Sorry, your source code. Okay, but here the Docker pull and image means like it is kind of after taken your build, right? So from you have the source code, and after that you have taken the build, and the build also you have to store somewhere, right? Same like source control, you have to version the artifact also, right? So in those scenario only we are just using the git docker pull push, those commands we are using it. So you can just say like the artifact repository. So similar like the source control, right? So you have to versioning the artifact also, right? So for the particular source control, so this is the artifact, this is the binary I got. So I need to save somewhere. So then only during the deployment I can use it. So Mebrat. So
Thank you.
yeah. So for example, right? So each and everything it will have the different maybe the functionalities, Mebrat. So for example, right? So you can see like the DevOps. Okay. So I will sign in Docker Hub also. Yeah. So here you can see, right? So how even you are using the git pull, git push command. Okay. So this is how they are managing the source control, like who is committing and when they have committed, and for which task they have added the coding changes. Okay. So for all those things, they can maybe the git will allow us to manage it. Okay. So this is the git source control UI will look like. Okay, so for example, you can create the many repositories, and inside the repository you can configure your git policies also, like maybe the developer they can't delete the particular repository, they can just have the read and write access, but the admin only they can maybe they delete the repository, and those kind of functionalities it will be have for the source control management. Okay, but when it comes to the Docker Hub, right, this is the image repositories. So here you can see, right, so these are all the images. Okay, so for example, I want to deploy the SQL server as the I want to run the SQL server as the one container. So still it is possible, even the Oracle also. So you every maybe the every company, right, so they will be providing the Docker version here, and with that we can spin up the container very easily. So for example, right, so this is the one container, the Couchbase is the one container, this is the NoSQL document database. Okay, so this is the Ubuntu, Redis, and then nginx. Okay, so for example, Oracle I will go. Okay, the Oracle, the Docker builds of Linux. Okay, I don't know, this is the Java one or the database. um, yeah, maybe you can say like MySQL server. Okay, so they have just provided the image version. So when you are you can clone the MySQL image. When you are running it, right, you can create the MySQL server database here. Okay, but here also, right, when you are pulling or pushing the image, so you have to use the docker pull and the those kind of commands only we have to use. So that is specific to the tool only, so they have just provided the command, the name like that, the pull push. But anyway, right, so there you are pushing the source code, but here you are pushing the images, so that is why they have the same name kind of things. But there they are maintaining the source control, but here we are maintaining the artifact, the images. Okay, maybe, yeah, so I have the local also, I have installed the Docker. Maybe I will tomorrow, right, so I will show some overview about the Docker hub, the repositories, my brother. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe you can also, right, you can just try to install the Docker desktop in your local machine. But maybe you can just follow some you can just follow like the installing the Docker desktop in Windows. You will be having many websites. You can just follow one, and maybe you can just try to install my brother. Okay, so that maybe the
Sure.
tomorrow, right?
Do we have how to? Yeah.
Yeah, so the
Do we
tomorrow,
have
right, so
the
whenever I am running,
details?
yeah, whenever I'm just running some commands, so you can also run in your
Right.
own
Okay.
environment also. Okay,
Uh,
so okay, my
so do
brother,
we have a document how to like
install.
install this Docker?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so maybe, right,
Or
so
do we
yeah, so my brother, you can just Google search like
Google? Okay.
installing the Docker in Windows. Maybe
Sure. Okay.
okay, maybe I will just, because that's a many websites will be available, my brother. Okay, maybe if you want, if you are facing some difficulties, I will search and give it to you. But that is easily you can do, so that you can just try. So then
Sure.
only you can maybe for other installation also you can go by yourself. Okay, and
Okay.
so okay team, so I'm having another one call, so we will connect tomorrow. Okay, for the demo part.
Sure. All
Okay,
right.
so you
Thank
can
you.
just try to install the Docker desktop in your machine. Okay, so thank you team, so thanks for
Ah,
joining.
thanks a lot.
Yeah,
Talk to them.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
bye, good night.
Good
Night.
night.